morning or afternoon, depending on what time of day it is where you're watching this. My name's Judy Niemeyer, and I'm going to teach you today how to do the leaf top foundation units. And I'm going to show you on this quilt behind me that this is what we're going to go over. So I'm going to teach you all of that information, and it's in the Stella Maris collection. So the first thing I want to go over is you should have everything basically pre-cut if you have if you use Quiltster to cut everything out. You probably have a bag of fabric that's all cut into strips. That's called for this is group K, and each one of your strips will tell you what the fabric number is. You should also have a stack of bags here, and if you look at the very top of your pattern, the very first thing it tells you is that you're supposed to have a bag labeled K1, K2, K3, K4. So there's 4 bags. And if you've already pre-cut all your papers, each one of those bags should have papers in them. And the papers that are in K1, so just double check, are K1R papers, and there should be 8 of them. Bag K2 should have the K1L papers in it. Bag 3 should have the K2R papers in it. And bag 4 should have the K2L papers in it. All right. So what we're going to do is go over the instructions, and I want to show you a few tips. Then we're going to cut all your fabric. So let's go to the second column, and you're going to see where I put my fabric chart here. And in this fabric chart, I have actually put a fabric swatch on each one of the colors. So I have my fabric K1, my fabric K2, K3, and K4. And those are the only fabrics that we're using to build this unit that we're talking about. One of the other things I want to bring to your attention, because a lot of people skim over stuff really fast, is you have a color layout. And in this color layout, it actually tells you where the fabrics are. Don't get this layout confused with your unit pieces. It's your fabric number. So we have to give the fabric number an inventory number, or the fabric color an inventory number. And the reason we do that is so Quiltster can track that fabric every time we use it and add the total up. So the other thing I like to do when I'm cutting something out is I also like to go and find where the fabrics are listed. So my very first fabric listed is fabric K1, and you're going to find that most of the time your fabrics are listed in order, unless we have to move fabrics around a little bit because of how the templates are cut out. So I put a swatch right above all of the cutting instructions for fabric K1. And then I came over to the second page and I used a swatch for fabric K2. I put a swatch for fabric K3 and a swatch for fabric K4. The reason I like to do this is because sometimes I don't have time to finish up all the cutting, and so I have to come back the next day. Sometimes it gets put away for a week and then we come back and finish it up. So it just helps me get familiar with what fabric color I'm supposed to be working with, instead of having to flip back and forth through the instructions to figure out what my fabric is. All right. I'm going to pull the fabrics. They've already been pre-cut, and I'm going to lay my book over here for a little bit. We also have all of our papers, our foundation. These are the template, the T templates, the template layout sheets that are all in a pile. I'm going to pull my fabrics out of my bag, And then we're going to get rid of this bag because we're not going to use it anymore. So I'm going to set it aside. And on each one of my fabrics, I should have a number on there that says fabric K4. And it's, since we've already cut the strips, it's also going to tell me that I have 4 1.5 inch strips. Then I'm going to find K3 fabric, which I believe is this one. Yes, it is. And I'm going to stack that on top of the K4 fabric. Then we're going to find the K2 fabric, and we're going to stack that on top. And then K1. So I'm going to work in order there. Now I have all my template layout sheets, and what I like to do with these layout sheets is to sort them out and put them with the actual fabric that we're going to cut from to start with. So I'm going to open them up, and I have to go back to my directions because I do this every day and I don't remember what pieces go with what fabric, so I need to go back to my instructions and read it. And right next to where it says fabric K1 in the header, you're going to find that it says I need template layout sheet K1R and template layout sheet K1L. So we're going to look at our pieces, and there's normally a picture there of them. And this one says it is K1L1. So I know I need that one. We're going to set our fabrics here. And then the next one is K1R, which is right here. And I'm going to just flip that over. Then I'm going to turn the page, and I'm going to find fabric K2. And fabric K2 tells me I need the template layout sheet for, and this one's actually called template layout sheet number 1. And so we're going to put that piece, and I'm going to just slip it inside so we don't get it mixed up. And I'm going to flip that upside down. Then we go to fabric K3, and fabric K3 is telling me I need template layout sheet number 2. So I have a template layout sheet number 2, and then I believe I need template layout sheet number 3. So we're going to take this and we're going to put these pieces with this. And I'm going to just put a little note on here for a second, just to because I need to remember something. And then I have fabric 4. And fabric 4 tells me that I need template layout sheet number 4. And this is it right here. And I'm going to slip that inside as well, just to keep track of it. And I'm going to fold these up in here. Okay. So now I'm going to slip this back into my sheet here. And we're going to go back to page 1, and I'm going to fold my fabrics, restack them in order. And I'm going to grab the very first piece, and I'm supposed to have 4 strips. And if you look at the graphic below, it shows you basically how you're going to cut these pieces. I'm going to pull all the stickers off, and I'm going to open up my strips. I don't have to be really accurate with the stacking on these because we always give you some extra fabric to work with. So I'm just going to kind of shake them together along the edges. Then I'm going to look at my picture, and it tells me that I need to cut from K1L, that I need to get 2 pieces off the first half. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and I'm just going to come over here and clean off the selvage. And we're going to grab our repositionable glue, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my repositionable glue on my next piece here too. Get the little loose chunks off of there. Now I'm going to take my very first piece and I'm going to stack it just like this. I'm going to grab my curved ruler and just lay it in along the edge like that. And I'm not going to do an accurate cut. It's just going to be a rough cut to give me some extra fabric. And then I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to cut the next piece. And again, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to do a rough cut along that edge. Now we need to find all of our paper clips, and here we go. I'm going to put a stack of paper clips on my table for now. And we're going to clip that template to our fabric. Now we're going to take the rest of our strip, and I'm going to clean off this edge down here. I don't like working with the selvage, so I like to cut them off if there's room. And then we're going to take and put the other template layout sheet. And see how nice that layout sheet just sticks to the fabric? And the great thing about this repositionable glue is you can pull this off and it doesn't leave the residue on the top of the fabric. So we're going to do the same thing here. Do a rough cut there, and then we're just going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take my leftover fabric and we're going to stack it over on another table. I'm going to put a paper clip on here. And at the bottom of my instructions, it's going to tell me what bag to put these pieces in. And it says Unit KR templates are placed in bag 1. So this is my KR. And the Unit KL are placed in bag 2. Now we're going to flip our page and we're going to go to the next fabric, which is my K2 fabric. We're going to open up the fabric. Remember, we're working with cotton, so we have to make sure we put all of our fabrics and stack them right sides up. And this one shows me that I have to cut 4 pieces from this layout sheet. So I'm going to look at this. Actually, I need to cut 8 pieces. I need to read my directions too, so I have to cut 8 pieces. So I have to open these up. I'm quickly going to go to the iron and press that crease in the middle. so that lays down pretty flat for me. Now I'm going to put my repositionable glue. Take the stickers off. Okay. Now I'm going to grab my curved ruler, and again I'm going to do a rough cut right along that edge. Then I'm going to flip this, move this up for a second, and I'm going to flip this up, and I'm going to do a rough cut along this edge. And I'm going to slip this back on to my stack. And I'm going to move the next one up there. And we're going to do it one more time. Now my instructions tell me that I need to cut this piece apart. If you look at the cut lines, cut line 1 comes up here, and you can't cut all the way through because cut line 2 overlaps it. So we're going to do a partial cut on cut line 1. We place it right on the cut line that it shows, and then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to rotate my piece. I'm going to fold this piece back, finish that cut, and then we're going to do the same, just come over here and finish that last little cut there. These pieces go into the K1R is placed in bag 1. So we're going to find my bag 1, which is right here. That's my K1R. And then the K1L is placed in bag 2. Now we're going to work with fabric K3, and I should have 8 strips. The strips were cut 3.5 inches wide. I'm going to place my 2 layout sheets here. And I'm going to open up each one of these. The very first one I cut some swatches off of, so I'm going to start with the second piece. We're going to remove our little stickers. And put my last piece on the top of it. Let's cut the selvages off. We're going to take both layout sheets, put our glue. I'm going to look at the picture in my pattern, and it shows me that my K2R template is placed on this side. I'm just going to double check and make sure I'm going to move it just a little bit. Give myself a little bit more room here. Okay. I'm going to look at the 3 sections. So I have a section 1, a 3, and a 5. And I'm actually going to put a paper clip on each one of these sections. Now we're going to go to the other half. And since I didn't press my center, I'm going to go ahead and place this one as it shows me, but I'm going to put it at this end. And then I'm going to cut my fabric here. Add the paper clips to each section. Since I'm working with another unit, instead of cutting this, I like to put the pieces into my bags as a whole piece if I'm not going to work on this section right away. So I'm going to find the bag numbers, and it tells me that K2R templates are placed in bag 3. So I'm going to look at my layout sheets, and this is my K2R. So I'm just going to fold them up and put it in that bag. And then this one goes into bag 4. Right, we have one more piece here. I'm looking at my strips, and it shows me that I can get everything out of a half a piece. So I'm gonna cheat here. Instead of opening these up right now, pull the stickers off, and then I'm gonna cut it right on the fold. Then I'm gonna cut my selvage off, and I can see how long that needs to be. So we're going to grab our glue, now I'm going to restack these. So that they're all facing right side up. We have 8 strips here. We're going to place the template on there, down towards one end of it. And then it tells me to cut on line 1, line 2, and line 3. And then I'm going to cut along the end. The reason I'm cutting these pieces and I didn't cut the last one is because I have to put half of them in one bag and the other half in another bag. So let's find our two bags. This one, it tells me here that the K2 bag 3, and this one is my K2L. And if I'm gonna have to look at the little pictures because I want the ones that are slanted this way. And that's my section 4. Then I have a section 2 and a section 2. Because we use the same layout sheet, so what I'm looking at is the pieces are slanting like that. And then these pieces, actually these pieces go into my bag 4. Because these are my L pieces. And these are my R pieces. Okay. So now we have all of our cutting completed for the leaf top. The next step to we're going to come back and do our curved paper piecing. I have two bags here. I'm going to start with bag 1 and bag 2, right? And when you start with the paper piecing, you always need to look at your instructions, because when we build the graphics, we don't always build the graphics according to what bag is the first bag to work on. And this particular set of instructions, it looks like the graphics are built for the pieces that are in bag K2. So I'm going to set aside my bag 1 pieces, and we're going to work with bag 2 and follow the graphics in the instructions. So I'm going to set these aside. We're going to pull the pieces out of bag 2. We should have 3 pieces in here. What I'm going to teach you is how to put a vein on, which I actually use a technique that I call curved paper piecing for this. We should have 8 pieces. I'm only going to show you, actually I'm going to keep that bag because I'm only going to show you 1 piece for this, all right? So we have to we're going to pull one of our papers off the bottom of this bag. And we're going to use that as our sample piece. Then we're going to take 1 piece of fabric off the bottom. We're going to put this back in our bag. And then we're going to take one of our strips off. Okay. And sometimes you need to keep a hold of your template pieces, because you may have to go in there and do some sewing for some TRP lines. So I'm going to double check this one. This template does not have any TRP lines on it, so I'm okay with that. But this one actually tells me I need to sew a TRP line before I do anything with it. So I'm going to hold on to this template for a second, and I'm just going to put these pieces back into my bag. All right, so the very first thing it's going to tell me to do here is I need to turn my fabric wrong side up, and it tells you that in the instructions, and I'm not going to read the instructions. So our fabric is stacked wrong side up now, and then I'm going to use, if I use my repositionable glue for this very first piece, it works really nice because I don't have any glue on the back side of it. The disadvantage is sometimes it doesn't stick as nicely as an actual glue pen or my Yoo-hoo. So I'm going to try this piece, and or this repositionable glue, and if it works, we'll use that, because it's actually the cleanest glue that we can use for the technique I'm working with. When I put this on, I need to make sure that I do not get any glue under section 2. I only want it under section 1. If I get it under section 2, then I can't get my pieces to roll through under the feed dogs or the pressure foot on my machine, because the pressure foot will, once it hits that repositionable glue, it will actually just stop and that piece will be up. So when I put this on, I want to make sure that it only sets under section 1. I can actually see the lines through this. If you have a light table, it's a little bit easier. But another way that has been a lot of CIs use to teach is they'll come in here and they'll actually trace the dashed lines, and I'm doing that with a marker. And now when I flip it over, I can see exactly where my dashed line is on the back, so that I know I'm getting keeping the glue in position. We're going to take this piece, and notice that our fabric's plenty big, and we like that. And before I do anything else, I'm going to read my instructions a little bit here, because it tells me that I need to sew some TRP lines, okay? And I want to know when I'm supposed to do that. The first thing it tells me I need to do is sew a basting stitch. And I usually set my machine about between 2 and 2.5. And you're going to sew the basting stitch right on that dashed line. And after I sew that basting stitch, it's going to tell me to come in here and do the TRP lines. So it wants me to do the TRP lines. So we're going to do that first. We're going to take this piece over to our machine. My stitch, I'm going to actually, there we go, we're about 2.2, which is fine. And I'm going to sew right on that basting line. You can't see what I did here on this side, but I do want to point out that it says basting stitch line 1. Okay, now when I flip it over, you can actually see where I did my the sew line for the basting. What we use that basting line for is that gives us the trimmed edge. That would be where the trimmed edge would be if we were using a curved ruler to fold back and trim. And we can't do that when we're doing a curve, so we use the basting line to give us that position right there. Right? Now what I want to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to sew my TRP lines. The next thing I want to do is just take and cut the threads off so that I don't have all those threads all over my fabric. I like to just clean them off. And what I'm using is my little curved ruler, or curved scissors. It's not a ruler, it's scissors. Okay. Now the next step here is I have to take this piece and I have to sew the TRP lines on this one. Now if I sew the TRP lines on this template and then I pull it off, it's going to be torn in half. And so what I want to do, instead of sewing it right on the template, and I have 8 of these I have to do, I'm going to actually just take a fold template, and I'm going to place the fold template just off to the edge of the TRP line, and I'm going to fold it back, and then I'm going to mark it just a little bit. And after I get that, I'm actually going to sew just right along that paper there. After I get that sewn, then we're going to clip the threads. And I'm going to put my template back into my bag. Okay. So now we have our TRP line. That was step 4. Now we're going to flip our piece over like this. And what I'm going to need to do is match that line up with this piece right here. And it actually, that's correct. This one's going to go like that, and that's going to go like that. Okay. That looks like my picture. So now I'm going to grab my fabric glue pen. And what I'm going to do is put a little bit of glue just inside that dashed line. And that's my basting line. I'm sorry, not dashed line, it's a basting line. And I'm going to glue those two pieces together. And then I'm going to run it back down. Almost lost my glue. We're going to glue that right along the basting line. And then we're going to do the same. And I'm just going to push that and just run your finger right along that glue so that you know that that's on there, because you don't want the fabric to come loose. Now we're going to take this and we're going to put the paper to the top, and we're going to go to my machine again, and I'm going to sew right along the sew line 2. Okay. And if I just put it flat, I may end up with puckers under there, so I'm going to show you a trick. So we're going to start right along the edge of the paper. Get my thread started here. Okay. So I'm going to lift my paper just a little bit so that it's not laying flat against the fabric underneath it. All right. I'm going to put my fingers underneath the paper, and then I'm going to run my other finger right along that sew line just in front of my pressure foot, and we're going to sew. So we're going to go to the iron, and I'm going to press this piece back like that. So this is what it's going to look like before we go to before we start trimming. So the next step we're going to do is to flip it over, and it's going to tell us to trim, and I'm going to trim my straight lines first. Put my ruler right along the outside edge. That's the perimeter of my piece, and we trim right on that line. Don't leave 1/8 of an inch or anything. Trim right on that line. Then we're going to go to the next one. That little cut I made there is for my smart corner. Now I'm going to move it up to the top, and I'm going to cut the smart corner at the top. We're going to pick up our curved ruler. I'm going to start it right here, and then I have to adjust my ruler as I cut. But it will slide on here really nice for you. So just put some pressure on that. Start at the bottom, and then just slowly let that ruler slide. And it gives you a nice curved edge as your guide. So we've cut this down to the correct size now. And in your instructions, and it's actually for step 10, what it's going to tell us to do is to fold back the vein that we just sewed on so that we can actually see the basting line. Now I'm going to take my ruler or my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut right along the edge of this fabric and down like this. Now we're going to take the rotary cutter, and I'm going to free motion and cut the basting stitch off. So there's that basting stitch that I sewed on. Now with some fabrics, when you start doing your machine quilting, if you don't clean this basting stitch out, it'll show up with your quilting designs because you can actually see the shadow of that thread. So I like to clean that off. Now when I flip it over, you can tell how it's cut there. You have to trim before you cut this piece out. All right? So I'm going to just show you another little picture, and look at what I did here. I actually trimmed that piece off. So now I have just less than 1/4 inch. You're going to repeat this process for all 8 pieces, and then you're going to pick up your bag 1, and you're going to go back and do it for bag 1. When you're working with bag 1, just realize that the graphics we gave you were for the K1L unit, and so everything will be a mirror image, but the steps are still the same. Okay, we're going to start on the unit K2L and K2R. I want you guys to read the instructions. All of our paper piecing instructions are very similar. We pretty much, step 1, step 2 is the same throughout all of our patterns. But you need to always read them and look at the graphics, because sometimes we have a left unit and a right unit, and we only do graphics for one of those units. In this pattern, it looks like we did graphics for the left unit. So when you're done, you'll go back and follow the steps and do all of the stacking process again and repeat everything for the right unit. Before I start the paper piecing, I want to actually just review the stacking, and I'm going to review the stacking for K2R since I have everything ready for the K2L in my bag over here. I just want to go through and do some review on this. In your bags, both bags, you should have a foundation unit that looks like, and your fabric stacked, and we didn't cut this apart. So we're going to cut it now. And I'm going to actually take my ruler and do cut line 1, and then we're going to do cut line 2, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to slice some of this excess off right here. So now we're ready to stack our pieces. You're going to look at your foundation papers, and remember, I'm just demoing with K2R right now, and then we'll get back to the other ones. And on K2R, you want to find section 1, Here's your section 1, and there's section 5. And so you're going to start stacking. Section 5 is the very bottom. Then you're going to stack section 4. Then you have to find section 3. And then the piece for section 2. And notice I'm putting all my sew sides. And then we have section 1 is the top piece. So I'm going to take these pieces and we're going to clip them together. I'm going to find a big paper clip. And I have one right here. I'm going to put these back into bag 3, and then we're going to set this one aside, and we're going to finish it after we finish the pieces in bag 4, because the bag 4 pieces happen to match the graphics. So my very first section here, what I want to do is I'm going to look at my pieces, and this is my template piece right here, and it's the dash line. And I like to be able to, when I start something, because sometimes our fabric is directional fabric, I want to make sure that when we set up our templates, we have it set up so that if you position it the same as what it shows on the template, or on this template piece, if you position it onto your fabric that same way, then your directional fabric's going to run through your whole template, just as if you had gone through and fussy cut everything. So I'm going to flip my template over and see how that's supposed to match up there. And it looks like it's supposed to go like this. And I can see my dash lines if I hold it up, but that's the way that's supposed to fit. So I like to set the first piece onto those templates, and then I'll pick up my fabric, and these are the pieces I did for that, and I'll flip my fabric over to match that. Then we're going to grab, I'm going to use the repositionable glue and make sure, and I'm just going to glue all 4 pieces right now, and that gives a little bit of time to dry on each piece. And then I'm going to match my template piece up and glue the first piece onto that fabric. Once I do that, I can pull this piece out, and I can put my template over here, and then we flip the fabric, the next piece, so it's wrong side up, and now all I have to do is position that piece. And I'm just matching everything. It's just copycat. So if you put the first piece on correctly, everything else follows. Our next step here, there's a lot of excess fabric here. If I don't need all of that, I like to come in and clean it off just a little bit. So I'll leave about 1/4 of an inch and just get rid of some of the excess. And so I'm going to cut it along the top as well. And then I'm going to clean it off along this side a little bit. Get rid of my scraps. Now we're going to take our fold template. I'm going to clip this back onto here so I don't lose it. And take my extra pieces and put them in my bag. Take the first piece. And remember, we have the wrong side of the paper, which is the side with no printing, to the wrong side of the fabric. Now we're going to fold back. We're going to take our add 1/4 ruler, and we're going to trim. And then I like to just crease that line a little bit, set it off to the side, pick up the next piece, place it on the solid line that's labeled line 1, put the add 1/4 ruler, trim, stack. Oops, that piece, I must have missed that piece. Line 1, fold back, add a quarter. Stack it. Place line 1. Fold it back, add a quarter, trim, and stack. Now we're going to get rid of our little fabric pieces. We're going to grab the pieces for section 2, and my sew side is this edge, and I'm just going to look to see, and I'm going to draw some lines for you really quick. Here we go. So here's the edge of my paper, so I'm just going to highlight it, and here's the edge. And if I look, I can see where that piece is. So what I want to do is I'm going to place this, and that little template is so, I got lots and lots of room, so you should not have a problem. Just make sure you can see fabric on this side and this side of the paper. Then we're going to take the next piece, position it, position, I'm going to pick up my fabric pen, and I'm just going to lift up the light fabric that's on the top and put just a little glue underneath there, and that'll hold those pieces together. Since my dark fabric's on the bottom, I do not have to worry about anything shadowing. Now I have all 3 pieces ready to sew, or 4 pieces ready to sew. So we're going to pick these up, and I'm going to put this rest of these pieces in my bag. We're going to lift it, and I'm going to turn it to sew this way on line 1. So I'm going to rotate my stack the same way, because then it's easier to pick them up. I don't have to turn every single one. We're going to lift our pressure foot, and we're going to sew on line 1. Then we're going to pick up the next piece, and I'm just going to lift my pressure foot, slide that back a ways, sew on line 1. And remember, if you have a thread cutter on your machine, you can cut the thread in between each one of those pieces as you sew them. We have to go press all of these pieces. One at a time. You're going to open up that fabric, and you're going to press. And you want to make sure you get those seams opened up. I am using steam, and I like to finger press that open before I put the iron on it. going to take each piece, and again, I'm just going to get rid of this excess as I go through, and place my fold template on line 2. We're going to fold back the paper, place the outer quarter ruler, crease your line, and stack. We'll do that 4 times. We have all 4 pieces stacked. We're going to pick up the next one, and we're going to place it right on there. This time I have my light fabric on the bottom, and what I want to do is make sure that I have just a sliver of light showing along my dark seam allowance. This will stop any shadowing issues when I get ready to sew. All 4 pieces are stacked. Now we're going to flip the seam allowance back, the top seam allowance, and we're going to glue those edges. We're going to take it to our machine, and we're going to open up the paper and sew on line 2. I'm going to finish the paper piecing, and then I'll show you how to, what else we have to do. After the paper piecing is done, I'm going to show you guys how to trim. We have to do 1 TRP line on this unit, so we're going to come in here and let's sew our TRP line. And remember, you guys can chain sew those TRP lines too. Just lift your needle in between each one and move it. Okay, so we have the TRP line. Now let's take our ruler, and I'm going to cut all the straight edges. So I'm going to start down here and cut this smart corner at the bottom. I am going to show you guys a little trick. Sometimes in your trimming process, when you have really long pieces like that, they have a tendency to move when you're trying to trim. If you'll just take and put just a touch of glue right there at that tip, that'll keep that from moving under your fabric. Or keep the fabric from moving under the paper. That's what the issue is. I said that backwards. The more accurate you are at trimming, the better these pieces will fit together. All right, we're going to take the curved ruler. We're going to use the inside curve. We're going to trim along the inside. I'm going to throw away all of this scrap. Now what I want to do is show you guys how to join the 2 left pieces. And I hid one underneath here that I have done. So here's our 2 pieces. And this is right at the end, and this is curved piecing. So before we can do the curved piecing, we have to remove the foundation paper. All right. So I'm going to take this piece, the bottom, and I'm going to tear the paper right along that seam. Just move the paper off to the side right now. And if you have a TRP line, don't just yank on it because it might pull your stitches out. Just come up and hold on to it and tear along the edge of your TRP line. If you have a little set of tweezers and you have fabrics that you just can't get out, you can take your tweezers and pull the little bits out if you need to. Most of the time I don't worry about little tiny stuff like that. So now I'm going to take the end there and loosen that up, and we're going to grab each one of these pieces and put your finger right on the line. That's your sew line that I'm holding. I'm going to put my finger on that sew line again, and then I start tearing, and that keeps you from tearing the first 2 or 3 stitches back on each one of these lines. Then I'm going to tear along the TRP line. Okay. Another little trick I'm going to show you is sometimes I like to clean off this excess, so I'll fold this back and I just clip those dog ears off along that. I notice that when I do that, my pressing goes a lot easier for me. It really reduces the bulk in your seams. All right. So now we're going to take both pieces and they go together just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over. And the first thing I want to match is this smart corner here. And you see how that's going to match up? I'm going to grab my glue pen and I'm going to put glue right along the tip of that and match up that smart corner. Then I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to, the last, I'd say probably 1.5 inches, I'm going to run my glue, and then we're going to match this smart corner. And I'm going to push the fabrics together along that edge there. After I get both ends matched, then I'm just going to continue. And I'm going to glue that nice and even and match the raw edges along the curved seam. So now the next thing I want to do is this. I'm going to grab a little piece of paper. This paper has some repositionable glue on it, so I folded it up. And I'm going to use this at my machine as a starter. Because if you have repositionable glue on your paper, it won't feed through if you don't have it. You just can't have it there. So I folded it so it's not in there anymore. Okay, so now I can start sewing. I want to put my needle down. I'm going to downsize my stitch to about 2. And I'm going to place my pressure foot. So if you notice my pressure foot, I'm starting about 2 stitches before. I'm going to line the pressure foot up with that curve there. And then when I start sewing, the paper will pull that fabric through for me. And now we're just going to follow through. With our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Before I get to the end, I'm going to grab another little piece of paper This one will work. It doesn't have anything on it. And I'm going to lay it down right underneath that point. And then I'm going to just pick it up and find where the tip is. And I can see just the tip of my smart corner. And then I'm going to put my tip of my seam ripper right there. And I want to sew to that point. And there we go. Cut your threads. And tear this fabric out. I'll cut my threads again. And then we're going to open this up. And I'm going to finger press that. And then I'm going to hit it with my steam iron. And there's our finished unit. If you look at your instructions, it's going to show you on the back page of your booklet that all you have to do is finish these two pieces, but you don't sew them together. All right? And that's it for unit K2, and it's also the end of the leaf top series.